Good evening and welcome to Burlington and Beyond. My name is Adam Sinesi and I'll be leading a discussion for the next hour with the 4 candidates for school committee for the election that's coming up on Saturday, April 9th. I'll also be joined by my 2 partners in crime this evening, my friend Pat Moreno and my friend John Glenn. So we're going to jump right into this as we've got a lot to cover in the next hour. So I'd like to welcome the first candidate of the night, Christine Monaco.
Thank you.
She's currently a member of the school committee, and I'd like to ask, how long have you been a member? When did you start to serve, and what's your experience been like serving on school committee?
I served 1 term way back when, and then I was off for a couple of years, and I've been on 24 years now running.
Just a little while.
Just a little while.
That's a good run. That's a good run. So did you, I take it you had children in the community? Did your children go to the Burlington Public Schools?
My 4 children all graduated from Burlington High. They all went through K to 12. They're all doing very well. And I now have 13 grandchildren in the Burlington Public Schools.
Holy moly.
So, well, actually, the oldest is a freshman at Holy Cross. I have 2 in the high school, 3 in the middle school, 1 in each grade, 3 in the elementary schools, 3 preschoolers, and I have a granddaughter, Maria, who is, she is a beautiful little girl, but she happens to have both Down syndrome and autism. So she is not actually in the schools, but she is taken care of by the schools.
I understand.
And so,
well, sounds like you got a lot of family here in town and your roots run deep. Tell me a little bit about your experience on school committee and some accomplishments that you're proud of. And
so the schools, when I first came to Burlington years ago, I had a cousin who still lives here. She's a little older than I am, and she had told me when I called her and I said, you know, what do you think? Should I move to Burlington? She was like, well, yeah, but she said, you know, we're on double sessions and we've got a teacher's strike. And I was like, oh, really? Maybe I ought to rethink this.
yeah.
But anyway,
What was that, in the 70s?
yeah.
Everybody was going through that.
Right. So when I did move here, that was all gone. You know, it was over, and the high school had opened, and it was great. And so yeah, I had 2 little kids at the time. I had 2 more here, and then I worked in the schools for over a decade. And then I ran for school committee, and there was so much to be done. I mean, it was incredible. We talk about 10-year-old textbooks now being old. Oh, they were way older than that when our kids were there. There's so much progress. And if you just jump up to the more current progress, we have the integrated preschool, we have before and after school programs, we have just fantastic learning going on in our schools. Just, I mean, it's incredible. We've got new buildings, the memorial, the Marshall Simons is all but new. You know, it's great with all the new additions and stuff. And we have a great superintendent who has brought in so many positive things like response to intervention. He has upgraded and updated our music and art programs. They are like nationally known. They're just excellent. They're top notch, and it's an honor to be a part of those programs and making them as great as they are.
Well, that's fantastic. Gentlemen, do you want to
Yeah.
jump in? I don't want to hog.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm anxious to learn a lot about schools and whatnot. But the question I have is, with regard to what's going on in the schools today, with the emphasis on technology, and you know, this is, I guess, the way you look at it, there's no real correct answer. But do you feel that there is a balance or a fair balance between what I consider the liberal arts and technology? Are the kids getting, and the reason I say that is because there's so much technology, and I am concerned that maybe that aspect of the teaching program here in Burlington and everywhere else is probably just taking, and I know a lot of it is needed, but I am worried. And yet, I attend all of the, or most of the shows that the school puts on. They're terrific. They're absolutely terrific, and that's a big plus for the liberal arts. But in terms of language, in terms of English, in terms of arts, is it a balance, or is that something that you're striving for?
I think that you have to look at technology as a tool. So if you take our curriculum, whether it's math, science, history, language arts, foreign language, the curriculum doesn't change because you use technology. You simply deliver it
With
through technology. So instead of carrying around a big textbook, you have either a text or portions of a text. It's like an open source curriculum where we provide curriculum, other communities provide curriculum, and it's all on your device. And it could be any device. It doesn't have to be the device that we use. But no, I don't think there's any imbalance at all. I think the way you have to look at the technology is that it's the delivery system. Because our kids are so technologically savvy. They don't need to learn how to do it in school. They already know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a little tiny grandkid that pushes the buttons on the phone and gets the music to play. You know, it's just, so it's a
daughter's amazing
tool.
like
It
that.
really has no effect whatsoever. In fact, it's a help to deliver the different kinds of curriculum factors that each child needs, because they need so many different things. And now we have all these options because we can deliver it electronically. So that's my answer to that.
John, how about you? Do
No.
you have any questions
Well,
that
I've
you'd
got
like
a
to
few,
ask?
but I'll try to get into a couple that pertain more to the things that we see in town meeting and you know, the way that we evaluate our schools, and you know, how we look at the overall financial well-being of the town. And you know, how would you balance our cost per pupil and academic result vis-a-vis, you know, the surrounding communities?
Okay, that's kind of a complex question.
Yes, it is.
Because our cost per pupil is higher than some surrounding communities
Oh, I know.
because we don't charge any user fees. If you look at Lexington, they have user fees for just about everything. They have bus fees for kids that don't live.
That's not factored into the cost per pupil when they do their
No,
town
the
breakdowns?
parents pay those fees. So we provide everything. We provide busing even for a kid that lives a minute away from the school because it's a safety factor. We don't want our kids to not have safe rides to school. So there are no user fees in Burlington. There's no athletic fees, none of that. So that's why, in a large part, our cost is higher. Now, your other part of the question was, how does that relate to test scores? Is that or academic performance?
No, I think that's what
or-
parents, you know, use as a benchmark, saying, okay, you know, you test in the XYZ percentile, or your kids go to XYZ colleges. I'm not sure how they sometimes factor that in, but I think test scores is probably the most common breakdown.
Well, the answer to that question is that Burlington is kind of a unique community. We have 22 different primary languages spoken by children in our schools. So that's a lot of primary languages. You know, when I went to school, everybody in the class, English was their primary language. That is not the case here. So we have a lot of ESL work that goes on, and we have a broad variety of great kids, all different socioeconomic backgrounds. We are really like a little city here in Burlington.
So you think demographics here is different than a Lexington or a Woburn or a Winchester?
Yes.
Really?
I mean, we, you know, Lexington and Winchester have, I think, very different demographics from Burlington, and Woburn does, but in a different
Oh, and
way.
believe me, I understand demographics drive a lot of the sometimes expected
Right.
school results, but just wanted to kind of flush that one
Well,
out
I
because
think that
it gets
our
brought up.
academics are really, really strong, and I think that our test scores are quite good. They're not perfect, but who has perfect test scores?
No, I
And-
understand that.
and
Well,
the-
it's a you know, it's a measure. You know, if you're
Yeah.
spending this and you're hoping for this kind of outcome,
Well, if
and
you-
it doesn't work out that way, but
True. Partly because of what I said, the demographics. But if you look at the last 2 years, you can't make a comparison with our test scores because we administered the park at the request of the Department of Ed. And so the first of those 2 years, there were no test scores, so there was nothing to compare us to other communities. And this year, we did get test scores, but again, they weren't comparable because they were the park instead of the MCAS. Because
Explain the park.
the park is
We're really short on time at this point. I don't want to cut her off, but there are a couple of issues that we have to get to.
okay. Go ahead.
right.
We have to
I'll
talk.
tell you about
we
the
have
park
to-
afterwards.
We have
Fair
to
enough.
talk about accreditation.
Okay, what would you like to know?
How did the school committee board arrive at the decision to allow accreditation to lapse in Burlington?
Okay, in 2012, we had to. It wasn't the school committee at all. It's the superintendent's decision. That isn't
Okay.
up to the school committee. So the school committee got notice from Dr. Conti. He gave us a letter at a meeting, and he said that basically he did not want to go forward with the process. He had already gotten an extension on accreditation up until sometime in 2015. So we were good until some unknown date, because you never know the date. It's one of those nebulous things. It depends on when the meetings happen. So he didn't want to go through the process because it was a very complex process. And at that time, we were working on the new teacher accreditation, new teacher evaluation, the ESL, and a review that has to happen every 6 years by the Department of Ed. So he had really good reasons for not doing this.
Okay.
So also, Reading and Newton South did the same thing we did. And this is why I brought my crib sheet here. He made that decision in the fall of 2012, and just a few months later, at the beginning of 2013, Acton, Boxborough, Arlington, Bedford, Belmont, Brookline, Lexington, Lincoln, Sudbury, Newton, Weston, Winchester they sent a letter saying that they couldn't do it either. It had to change. And so what really happened is he made a very forward-thinking, progressive step, and he got NEASC, and with all these other communities, they all acted together and got the process redone. It was the right thing to do for our kids. I'm sorry that some people were frightened by it, thinking it would affect their kids getting into school.
If you were to do it again,
but
would you have
didn't.
done it different, or not you personally? Would the school board have handled it
The
differently?
only thing we would have done differently is we would have talked about it more. We had it, it came up in one meeting, and then it just sort of, nobody said anything except, oh yeah, okay, that's a good idea. And we should have talked about it more.
Do you feel that it's a valid criticism that what the school board did and what Dr. Conti did was in defiance of open meeting law?
No, because
it didn't
we
appear
never,
anywhere.
no.
It didn't appear anywhere on
was-
an agenda, or it didn't appear in the minutes. It was listed in the minutes as out-of-state travel.
Yes, it came up at a meeting. He gave us the letter at a meeting, and that was it. I mean, nobody called up and said, oh, why are you doing this? No one made an issue of it. It was something he had done, and it should have been on an agenda, and we should have talked about it. And somehow it fell through the cracks, and we
But it
didn't
wasn't
talk
on an
about
agenda, and it
No.
wasn't in the minutes.
Well, it was only in the minutes from when we did talk about
We
it.
need to move along, and the last question I want to ask before giving you a few seconds to make
Yeah.
an elevator pitch is: do you have any members in this that work in the schools that it would be any conflict of interest with anything that comes before the school committee?
No, I do not.
You have no members of the family that work for the school system.
No.
Okay. We only have a few seconds left. I'd like to give you, can we give her a little bit more than, because we're running down the clock here. We'll need to be more crisp with our questions moving forward. I'd like to give you 30 seconds to make an elevator pitch.
Well, okay, so I've told you most everything, but the truth is I am very passionate about education. I'm a trained teacher of mathematics. I worked in the high school with special ed kids in science and math. I love what I do. I love kids. I love young adults. I am very proud of our schools. I'm proud of the kids that are here and the kids that have graduated and how well they do. Parents out there, you've got absolutely wonderful kids. And I hope that you will help us keep that momentum going by keeping those of us who have the knowledge and the experience, and I ask for one of your 2 votes on April 9th. Thank you.
Christine, thank you for joining us this
Thank you.
evening.
Best of luck.
We're going to take a quick break,
Hopefully
and we're
not
going to
too
be
painful.
back with school committee candidate David Levitt. Welcome back now. We're here with school committee candidate David Levitt. David, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
So David, I guess the obvious question is, what has motivated you to get into this race?
Well, I first got motivated to get into the race about last spring when the NEASC accreditation issue was coming to the school committee. I was actually at just soccer game with the kids, talking to some parents, and parents were talking about an upcoming school committee meeting where NEASC accreditation was being discussed and that the high school possibly had lost their accreditation or wasn't accredited. Accreditation is interesting to me. It's what I do for work. I work at Bunker Hill Community College. NEASC accreditation is one of the responsibilities of me and my staff's responsibilities. So it was of interest to me, and I knew some parents were going to speak there, and I thought I should go and show some support and hear what had to be said. And I went with no intention of ever saying anything, went to the school committee meeting, kind of sat in the back and listened to the school committee describe what had happened, and Dr. Conti listened to some parents talk about what they felt, how they felt about it. And as I listened to the information, and I felt compelled to say something because some of the parents had some misinformation, the school committee had some misinformation. I thought I had something to offer, so I actually spoke at the meeting about what I knew about NEASC and how important I thought it was. And after that meeting, just people around town that weren't at the meeting that actually saw me on TV came up to me at soccer or at Shaw's or out to dinner and said, I saw you on TV, it was a really good job. There's some seats coming up, maybe you should think about running. That was back in the spring. I didn't think about it over the summer, and then the fall came. And I started thinking about it a little bit more.
So here you are.
I started thinking about it a little bit more and talked to my family and talked to the president of the college and the provost, and they thought I had some skills that I could really help, and they encouraged me to do it. And
So
here
let
I
me
am.
ask you a question. I guess we led with accreditation. The counterpoint is that the accreditation system needed to be improved, and the incumbent who we just had on, she's implied that several communities came together and they did sort of what Burlington had done. Is that a valid criticism that the New England accreditation standard needed to be improved for it to function properly?
There's always room for improvement in any process. The accreditation process definitely, is a cumbersome process, a lot of work involved, a lot of people involved in that. I'm not totally familiar with the high school process. I'm familiar with the college process of NEASC, and I'm sure it's very similar. And I know at the college process, it's a lot of work. It's a 10-year cycle, and we start the process at the 10-year mark, and we're working on it every year through. At the 5-year mark, we do a 5-year study. For the next 5 years, what are we going to do to improve in the next 5 years? So it is a lot of work. Whether it was antiquated and needed to be adjusted, maybe, but to just stop accreditation and not do your self-study, I don't think that
Makes
was
no
probably the right.
sense, yeah.
That wasn't the right decision.
David, the minutes are so precious. How exactly is Bunker Hill tied to NEASC? I didn't quite understand the connection.
Sure. All the colleges and universities in New England are accredited by this body, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, as are all school districts in the New England area are accredited by NEASC.
So you work for the school, for Bunker Hill,
Correct. We are
getting accredited.
Yes, we are
Okay, you're
accredited by
part of that,
NEASC.
yeah, okay.
We do a self-study and
Just briefly, what areas in particular do you think you could perhaps improve upon, or what is your expertise? What would you be looking at with regard to here?
Sure. When it comes to NEASC, the important thing about a NEASC self-study is for it to be open, honest, and inclusive. So if we're going to do the self-study again, just on that particular point, I'd make sure that everybody was involved, whether faculty, staff, students, stakeholders in the community, from parents to retired folks, because everybody has an interest in the school, so everybody should be involved in the self-study process. What I bring to the table is what I do at the college is, besides just the NEASC accreditation, I do strategic planning at the college. So we look at the budget and the processes that are in place, and we constantly evaluate those, make sure that things are running efficiently for
Good.
the college.
How long have you lived in town?
I lived in Burlington for 12 years. I moved in
So you
2004.
have a pretty good handle on what's going on in the town. I wish you well. I think it's a very important job, and I'm sure that you probably do a pretty good job at it. The lady that was here before you has been at it for quite a while. I don't want to make any judgments. I wish you both well. Your family is?
Yeah, I'm married
children?
to. Yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm married
know.
to my wife Susie. We've been together for 26 years now. Married for 16. I have 2 boys in the Fox Hill School, one in 1st grade and one in 3rd grade.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're right in my neighborhood, in our neighborhood.
Well, that's true. Getting beyond accreditation, which is a topic I've had discussions with school board members in the past on. What do you see the future direction of the Burlington school system from where it is today evolving, and how do you think you could impact that from being on the board?
Sure. I actually think this is a pretty exciting time in school districts, actually nationwide, with No Child Left Behind, that law being basically thrown out the door, and the new Every Student Succeed Act was passed in the fall. It's going to give districts a lot more leeway in the curriculum. Common Core was kind of imposed on the districts by the Department of Education.
Right.
Every Student Succeed tells the Department of Education they can no longer impose curriculums on school districts. So states and the districts can have a lot more leeway and say in the curriculum that's in the schools. And when it comes to assessment, Every Student Succeed Act, no longer you're just required to do standardized testing like No Child Left Behind it. Now, standardized testing can be a piece of the assessment process, but you can also develop other assessment things. What those are, is still up for discussion. Could be portfolio of student work, could be videos, it could be any other form of assessment besides a standardized test.
Are you saying that Common Core is no longer part of the structure of the state going forward?
It is, but they have the option. They'll have the option moving forward whether they want to adopt a new curriculum.
David, what's your history like voting in local elections?
In local elections, when I first moved to town, I voted pretty regularly as my kids got older, and especially I'd say the last 4 or 5 years when they really got involved in sports. Coming to vote on a Saturday has been a challenge. Usually my wife and I divide and conquer on a Saturday with practices and games. To get over to the high school to vote has been a challenge. So I'd say the past several years has probably been a little spotty. But I think it's important. A topic like the NEAS thing was something that got me engaged, and hopefully it's getting other people engaged. I know this election with the school committee, it's the first time in a while, I guess, has been a contested campaign. So I hope that brings some interest, because I know that only about 2,000 people in town actually vote in the town election. So a common problem around for everybody to get to the polls. So hopefully this is a topic that is of interest to everybody, that gets them engaged and want them to come out and vote on April 9th.
I don't know where to go. There's so many things now. I'd like to ask pretty much the same question I asked before, and that is with regard to technology in the schools. So, you're not teaching as such, but you are close enough to the situation to have an opinion on it. With regard to the liberal arts and technology, and I'm sure it takes place at Bunker Hill too, technology seems to be running away with everything, and I'm just wondering where it leaves the kid who is interested or might be interested, or are we destroying that interest with regard to liberal arts?
I think there's a place for technology across the curriculum, if done right. Even liberal arts
that's the
or
key,
the
done right,
sciences,
yeah.
I think there's a place for it. If it's done right, and you look at the research of how it can be done right, in liberal arts it could be used for graphic design, for writing, for research purposes, it could be used for that. But I think technology is important. It's a skill that every student should have, whether they plan to go to college or they plan to go out in the workforce. They should have basic skills in technology, like Microsoft Office, like Excel and Word.
Yeah.
That's at the college. That's a common thing we heard from employers, that our students come out and don't know simple Excel, and that's at the college level. We should be doing that at the high school level.
Yeah.
David, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
I'll
Go
let
ahead.
You have another question in a minute.
Well,
Are you related to anyone? Would there be any issue that came before the school board that could potentially represent a conflict of interest? Do you have any relatives working in the school system now that would prevent you from being able to negotiate a contract?
I have no relatives that live in Burlington or work for the school.
Is
so
there any potential business that would come before the school board that would somehow be a conflict of interest to your job at Bunker Hill?
There would not. As a matter of fact, before I decided to pull my papers, I actually, besides talking to the president of the provost of the college, I talked to HR, and I talked to the Ethics Commission, just to make sure, as someone who works with stakes, I do work for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, working at the college, I wanted to make sure there was no ethic violations there, and was assured, after talking to the attorney, we talked about some things, and we talked about the business that the college does and that Burlington schools do, and that there wouldn't be any conflict. So I don't foresee any now.
Okay.
how does your wife feel about you running?
She's excited. She feels that finally there might be somebody on the committee with young kids in the schools that can give a voice to the parents who maybe haven't had that opportunity in the past.
And your kids are small? I can't
7 and
remember.
9.
7 and 9. They must be excited too.
Oh, they're very excited. Yeah,
Yeah.
they keep asking when they think the election's tomorrow, actually. I keep telling them
Just-
it's not tomorrow.
Just to throw in something from, another point of view is obviously the school budget comes in front of town meeting every year, and it's one of the things that always gets looked at with a fine-tooth comb, just because school budgets in all towns are by far and away the biggest number. What's your impressions of how Burlington expends its revenues in the school system, and what's your thought process on right, wrong, cost containment?
Sure, I can't say whether right or wrong at this point. I just actually got my copy of the budget last week before I went to a conference in Atlanta, so I haven't had a chance to go through the budget. I've attended a couple
Sure,
of the
it's
meetings.
probably around $68 to $70 million.
What I am impressed about is the schools at the town meeting. It really invests in the schools. Not every town I know does that, and it's really good that they do that. I know at the college we do level funding every year. We don't get to increase our budget by any percentage every year. I do level funding across the college. We have a process in place that I help implement with level budget, and then when you want something above and beyond your budget, there's a process in place where people can make that request for the extra thing, but they have to justify it with data of why they need the extra thing, with an environmental scan of the area, whether it's regionally, statewide, nationally. There's something going on that we need this new thing, and here's the data that shows that it could be really useful. So any request like that, they request the extra money, and it goes through a committee, and then we approve or don't approve it. And
Yeah,
I think
well,
a similar process could happen in the Burlington schools.
Well, to some degree, schools at the K through 12 have kind of different mandates that they don't have a choice over, so that kind of impacts them to some degree, but fair enough. Any other questions? Because we...
We do have a couple of. We'll let you make your pitch, but I wish we had a chance to ask Christine this one. I think it was a great thing when recently the school committee allowed a group of canine dogs from various surrounding towns to do a quick sweep of the high school to see if there's a huge. Burlington has a bigger problem with opioids than a lot of the other communities in Massachusetts.
That's what I've heard, yeah.
I understand there was recently a sweep at the high school. I think we should see more of that. I applaud the current makeup of the school committee for doing that. I'd like to see more of it, though. Do you think, as a school committee member, that would be something that you would push for?
I think as a data person and a culture of evidence, I would want to see the data, what's out there, what are the other communities doing, what are the other school districts doing on that front, bringing the dogs in. It's kind of invasive. I mean, it definitely is an invasive thing, but worthwhile to keep our schools safe. So I'd like to see what other communities are doing, and if it's more regular than Burlington's doing, then maybe it would be something we should consider.
All right. We're going to close it out. Thanks for joining us, but you have 30 seconds to make your quick elevator pitch to the voters of Burlington.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate the opportunity. I got involved in the campaign for school committee because I think I bring a unique set of skills working at Bunker Hill Community College for the last 8 years, where I'm directly involved with the NEASC accreditation and strategic planning, involved with the budget process. I think those are some of the skills that I could bring to the school committee and help bring our good schools to become great schools. So I hope everybody comes out on April 9th and gives me one of their 2 votes.
David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you and good luck.
Thanks a
We're
lot,
going to
David.
take a brief break, and we'll be back with Karen Levy. I'm sorry. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We are back now with our next guest, Karen Levy, candidate for school committee. Karen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the first question, it's the most obvious question. Why have you decided to jump into this race and make a run at school committee?
Speaking of jumping in, yeah, you just went right for that. So several reasons. I guess first and foremost, I think I have a lot to contribute. I think I have the right skill set. I've got over 20 years in the legal profession, specializing in contracts almost that entire time. I can draft them, I can litigate them, I can negotiate them, I can put them together, tear them apart, whatever needs to be done. I also spent a lot of time, excuse me, as a mediator. I've got over 10 years as a volunteer mediator, basically resolving disputes between different parties. And my last position with the company was as an escalation manager, resolving high-level disputes and basically getting parties who were just worlds apart from one another to find a middle ground, to find a way to speak to one another, and to reach a resolution that everybody was either happy with or equally unhappy with, as the case may be.
What does I'm sorry, was there more?
You know, I think it's the most important part, and it's, for me, probably the most important reason I've chosen to run. I am the mother of a third grader at Memorial Elementary School, and I think that it's critical that we have what I refer to as current parent stakeholders on the school committee, certainly at least a majority of the school committee. At the moment, there's only one committee member that has children in the school system at the moment. And I believe her youngest is in 5th grade and will age out of elementary school next year. And I would really like to give the elementary school parents a voice on the committee.
I have to ask, just because it piques my curiosity.
Sure.
What does a volunteer mediator do? What would motivate you to volunteer to mediate?
I have a good heart.
Well, no, I'm not asking why the volunteering, but what sort of mediation would be needed? What are the circumstances?
Well, anything, any kind of case can be mediated. The training that I took relates, and this was a long time ago, through a volunteer program from a professional organization that I was a member of. And we are here to, the volunteers within my group are here to support the local court systems. We have a program set up in Woburn, and there's another one down in Norwood, I think it is. And the group of us here are basically just to try to lighten the load of the court system. They will call the docket in the morning on the, it's only in civil cases, and they will call the docket in the morning, and just to try to let them get through the system. The vast majority of cases will end up resolving themselves in mediation, and from what I understand, we've lightened their caseload a significant percentage.
So you're out of court Judge Judy.
Well, yes.
Karen,
I just don't get paid like she does.
I gotta get
how
on
long-
TV for that. That's why we're here.
how long
good
have you
practice.
lived in Burlington?
My family and I have been here 13 years.
Oh, oh.
Yes.
And you have 2 children?
No, just one.
Just the one, you
Just
said.
one.
Okay, yeah. You've probably had a chance to look at the current school committee and what they have been doing, and I'm sure you're aware of the problem they had with NEASC and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen areas that you think you could improve upon? And I particularly had something that John mentioned earlier, and that is the budget of the school committee, which has been pretty hefty right along, and a little bit of a bone of contention with regard to the town meeting. How do you feel about what's going on in the current school committee and with regard to
Specifically
the way
with-
things are running? Yeah.
Specifically with regard to the budget, or?
That and anything else that comes to mind.
So I think, you know, the term you always hear thrown around is transparency within the budget transparency. And I won't profess to know details about the current budget. I received a copy of it just a week ago and have just started to sort of sift my way through it. I've been attending the committee meetings as they're going through the budget approval process, and that's been extremely helpful. I met with Craig Robinson briefly, and he explained a little bit more to me about how the budget works. But again, you know, I don't know anything specific yet, areas where I might suggest cuts or additions or anything like that. I do think that it's important that parents are given a view into that and or a say into that. I think that it should be open for the entire community. I would like to see more questions asked, not necessarily because there is or isn't anything wrong, but just because
By the community.
by the community, by the school committee, by Ways and Means, you know, the approval meetings, or review meetings rather, school committee meetings that I've sat in recently where the budget's been discussed, as long as the district stays within the recommended guidelines, there's not much questioning that goes on. And I think there's a sort of a sense of maybe not complacency, but just, you know, as long as the numbers work, that's great. But I think we need to maybe take a closer look at where things are going and if there are areas that should or shouldn't be shifted.
Transparency is
Yeah.
especially important. Have you met Dr. Conti?
I have.
Mm-hmm.
I have.
And,
He rides my daughter's school bus, first day of school every year
Oh,
No kidding.
with Dottie.
yeah. That's
John, you've
great.
been quiet.
Huh?
You've been quiet. Do you
Well,
want to
you
jump
guys
in?
been all talking.
We
Go
talk
for it.
too
Go
much.
for it.
This is
Come
your
on.
chance.
So from where you sit, where do you see the future direction of the school system going? It's a question I asked your other guest, our other guest, I should say, but where Burlington is today, where it's come from, where it's headed, how do you think you can, while being on the school committee, help direct the system and areas that you think it needs improvement?
So I think this goes back to my comment about the fact that I can bring a better balance to the school committee coming from as a parent of an elementary school student. I think with all due respect and extreme gratitude to the incumbents, I think after 25 and almost 30 years respectively, things just change. Some for the better, some for the worse, but the issues change, the kids change, the curriculum changes, the education changes, everything changes. I think that I, like any parent of a current student, am just in a situation where you sort of move in different circles. Your life is what is going on in the schools, what is going on with the kids today, what is going on with the regulations and the drug issues and the types of drugs and the curriculum, the Common Core, the Every Student Succeeds. I mean, it's just, you live and breathe it. It's not that I think that people who are parents of kids who've aged out of the system or people who don't have kids in the system yet don't care about the schools. I just feel strongly that it's very different when it's your child and as a result your life is in the thick of it. As far as where the schools are going, I would like to see them continue to prepare the kids for life after high school. I think that we do a good job of preparing them for college and careers, but I think that we could improve there. I mean, who couldn't? But I'd also like to see us have some metrics that are measurable, some objective metrics that are measurable, not just standardized testing, but other things, whether it's enrollment rates, admission rates. I'd like to see a more in-depth look at consistent objective data that can tell us where we're going so that we can decide if it's the right direction or not.
Metrics for like how many kids that graduate go on to college? What kind of metrics are you thinking
So,
would be valuable?
I'm sorry, did you finish your question? I'm talking right over you.
No. So what other metrics would you consider valuable?
There's a lot of statistical data out there. There's the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that gives us a lot of information, both in a vacuum and when compared to other districts across the state and across the nation. The standardized testing, be it MCAS or PARC, the guidance counselors can provide information, and I'm sure they keep various statistics, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I think what's important is that we dive a little bit deeper into the data. I get the sense that to date we talk about a lot of things, but I don't know that we really dive deep and measure into anything. And sometimes it's hard to do. I mean, there's a lot of subjective criteria, the emotional well-being of the students, their day-to-day health, their physical well-being. There's a lot of things that can't be measured by a number, but I know that there are professionals out there that can look at the overall well-being of a school and a school district and the children within that school district and make
How do you feel about
analysis.
technology in the schools? Is it excessive? Is it absolutely necessary, all of it? Are the liberal arts getting a fair shake?
I think that, like everything else in life, there are good and bad things to technology. I think that, as my husband would say, everything in moderation. I would like to see us take a harder look at what effect the technology has
Is
had
having.
to date, both positive and negative, because I would guess that we will see quite a bit of both. And again,
agree.
I think that is one of the areas, back to John's question, where we need to really look at that and look at data year over year and see where the trends are and see whether it's having a positive or negative effect and adjust from there. I think technology is great in a vacuum. I know that there are a lot of studies out there that indicate that technology introduced improperly into a school environment can create as much, not harm, but regression as it does advancement.
Just learning versus learning.
Karen, how would you grade your rate of participation in local elections?
Oh, God. Poor, quite frankly, and quite honestly. And the only thing I can tell you about that, Adam, there have not been a ton of contested elections in my time here in Burlington. There hasn't been much buzz and much news, at least not that's made its way into our household. My husband and I are adamant about voting. We vote in every federal and state election. My parents were immigrants, and I learned from a very, very young age that voting is a privilege in this country and not one to be taken lightly, and it's very much an obligation in my household. I guess the only thing I can say for myself is that unfortunately I'm in good company, because I think about 90 to 91% of our constituents don't vote, and I think that that speaks to a larger problem than just myself or the school committee election. And I think that one of the things I would like to do as we look at new change and new leadership is how to bring those constituents out to the polls. In my work with the corporate world, I worked for a large Fortune 500 company, Hewlett-Packard, you may have heard of it. And I did quite a bit with our international teams overseas, and have a large experience with international and multicultural environment. And I think that there's an art to working with those groups. Again, my parents, my husband, I'm surrounded by immigrants.
I don't want to cut you off, but we only
You
have a
have to.
couple of
Go
seconds to
ahead.
go. I do have one more question, and then we're going to let you give your elevator pitch for 30 seconds.
Okay.
My question is, do you have anyone, I know you have a daughter in the system. Are you related to anyone that's working in the system right now as that may present a conflict of interest?
No. Within this school?
Negotiating a contract?
No.
You're a contract negotiator. That's your strength.
No, absolutely not. I am not related to anyone within the school district or within the town, and I would happily pledge that during any tenure I might have, I would avoid that at all costs. I mean, I suppose if somebody wanted to really, really take a job somewhere, I might not have a say in it, but short of some issue somehow or other involving my daughter specifically, I cannot think of any reason
Fair
that
point.
would raise a
Make
conflict.
your pitch.
All right. You got
This
30
is your
seconds.
30 seconds.
So my pitch, it's time for change, I think. It's certainly time to give the voters in Burlington a choice. I would like to believe that I can be a catalyst for that change, both because of my skill set, because of my background, and because of my higher interest in the current school districts because of my daughter. Hi, Zoe. I love you.
Well, Karen, thank you very much for joining us. This has been a great discussion, and
Thank
we
you.
wish you luck in the race.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you for hanging with us during the break. We're back for the final segment with school committee member Tom Murphy. So, Tom, how long have you been in school committee, and tell us a little bit about your experience with the committee?
I was first elected in 1995, so I'm coming up on 21 years, seven terms. Come a long way in the last 20 years. A lot has happened. I was a town meeting member for 7 years before I got on the school committee. Back in the mid-1990s, there was the school department brought forward a debt exclusion vote to do some work to some of the elementary schools, and I kind of ran the parent support group for that. It was essentially an override election. Lost by 60 votes, but it kind of got me into the whole school department mentality, and it piqued my interest. And a year or two later, I ran for school committee, and I've been on there ever since. And it's been a long 21 years, but a short 21 years too. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. A lot has happened. We've done a lot of good things. I'm very happy to give you a year-by-year blow, but I think
Highlights for free.
you've only got 13 minutes, so
Yeah, we're not here.
no.
for
But if
3
you, I
hours.
mean, if you,
Give us 3 bullet points. Give us 2 or 3.
Salient points.
3 bullet points, I would say facilities.
Okay.
We've obviously built a new memorial school, a rehab in addition to the middle school. It was the first new building in Burlington. The high school came online in 1972. And facilities was one of my main priorities when I came in. And I think we've done a very good job in terms of creating 10-year capital plans, sticking to 10-year capital plans. And I do know that we have buildings online here that are still going strong, that are much older than buildings in other towns that have been knocked down and replaced for $30 or $40 million a pop. So I think the town has been well served and the taxpayer has been well served by the way they're maintaining the facilities. Athletic facilities, those have been brought up to snuff. We've got a high school facility right now that I would compare to anybody in the state in terms of what we offer the kids. The main thing that this was my number one priority when I came on, and it's a thing that I'm probably most proud of. And I think if you look at most towns, there's always been a rivalry, if you will, between the school side of the town government and the town side of town government. And it's usually financially driven because everybody's looking for a piece of the pie, and there's always arguing, there's rivalries, there's your project is less important than my project type of discussions, and it doesn't the town doesn't do well by it because everybody's always fighting with each other. Mm-hmm. And I came in, and that was one of my main goals, was to try to get everybody working together on the same page. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate that during that time there was also a good board of selectmen in place. We got the Ways and Means Committee involved, and I think right now we have a very smooth budget process townwide. It starts in the fall and it works all the way through the spring, and everybody's involved and everybody's talking, and it's not a question of me trying to, or the school's trying to get something instead of them, or them trying to get something instead of us. We all work together and we all understand that we all have things we have to do, and it's just the system is a lot better in Burlington than I see in many other cities and towns, and I think it's because of that.
Well, that's refreshing to hear.
And
Did you have how many children?
I have 4.
And they all went to Burlington Public Schools?
They did.
Okay. Let me hand it over to Pat.
Yeah. How do you feel about Common Core? Do you have any particular feelings with regard to the park? And
From my standpoint, it's really got nothing to do with whether MCAS is better than park or vice versa. It took a long time, once MCAS came in, to try to get everything aligned, the curriculum aligned, the tests developed and the test working, and the kids used to how to take them, and you finally get it all moving in the right direction, and it seems to be working well, and then they changed
Yeah.
So, and this guy has nothing to do whether the Common Core is better or the park's better than the MCAS. It's like, trying to turn the ocean liner. It takes
Yeah.
a long time to do it, and once you start going in the right direction, you hate to have to turn it again. However, those decisions are not local decisions. Those decisions are made at a higher level than us, and we have to deal with whatever they tell us to do. Right now, the Massachusetts is going towards, they're calling it a hybrid, which has a little bit of the MCAS to it and a little bit of the park to it. The one thing that I do feel that we're positioned well for is that whichever way they go, it's going to be much more online driven as opposed to papers and pencils. And I think we as a community and a school system are better positioned for that than a lot of towns.
what remains to be done with regard to Burlington schools? What do you see any big shortcoming that we have right now that you'd like to improve upon, or is it improving upon what we've already done?
Well, I mean, the educational field is a dynamic field by definition. So when you say what remains to be done, there's always something else that can be done. You can improve on anything. Different concepts, different theories come in, and sometimes it's a moving target.
Is that the challenge?
It is a challenge, but it also is what keeps it interesting, frankly.
Yeah.
You're not putting it on autopilot and just sitting back and letting things happen. I think particularly with our administration that we have in place right now, they're very progressive, Dr. Conti in particular. And they're always looking to see what's coming down the road and try to stay a couple of steps ahead of it, and I think he's done a very good job of it. But there's always other things to be done, more things to be done from a physical standpoint. We've got to do some work to this building we're sitting in. This came online in '72, so this is getting on. We have an application before the state to try to do some rehab work in here, and we're waiting hopefully to get some action on that so that they will contribute to the cost. We've got, I was chatting with John a second ago, we've got 2 elementary schools, the Fox Hill and the Pine Glen, that are going to need some attention at some point. So it's, you know, it's like when you buy a house, you can't just put one roof on it and then it's going to stay there forever.
Yeah.
20 years, you're going
Gotta
to
stay
have to
with
do
it.
it again. So
Yeah.
it's a constant battle.
How about technology? Have we overdone it? Is it,
In what
as
sense?
opposed to, well, balancing it with liberal arts in the schools? And
In my opinion, no, not even a little bit. Technology, as we all know, and Mr. Glynn and myself and Pat are probably a little bit older than Adam, but the technology that's out there today that the kids know is way more than I'll ever know in my life. And in 5 years, the kids come behind them. So, yeah,
Trust me, I know all about that because
that's a never-ending. You know, you buy
Spiral going upwards. And,
you buy
you
a
know,
computer and it's defunct 2 years later because something else.
I think what Pat's getting at is the balance of liberal arts and technology that has been emerging in our society. You know, how do we keep that balance in the schools?
I think we've done a very good job, frankly, in Burlington. We've got a performing arts department. We've got an art program, music program. A lot of towns, in going back to the last 7, 8, 10 years, when financially times were tough, a lot of those things got cut in a lot of schools. You know, we've got a marching band in Burlington that's very good and has a lot of participants. Most towns don't even have marching bands anymore. We've got music programs at the middle school. We've got choruses. We've got orchestras. We've got all sorts of things going on that most schools don't even have. So I think we've done a very good job of maintaining the liberal arts end of things and maintaining that portion of it. And that's been a priority, frankly, of the school department because it is important. And you can't get too focused on the technology. I would agree with that.
Precisely my point.
But
yeah.
nevertheless, you have to keep up with the technology because frankly that's the
That's
future.
where the country's going. I have just a couple of questions. One's really kind of off the necessary, school requirements and stuff. But is Burlington, and I don't know if this is directly related to the school committee, but has Burlington ever, or does it have developed any relationships with surrounding colleges for exchange programs?
We have 2 programs right now, one with Middlesex Community College and one with Bay Path, which is, they have a satellite campus here at the Burlington High School. And we have programs in place whereby Burlington High School kids can be taking college courses and get college credits before we have kids graduating from high school that already have 3 or 4 college course credits in their pocket.
Have you ever thought about expanding that to some of the, more larger schools in the
We're
area?
always receptive to that. Middlesex and Bay Path
They're local and easy to get to.
You know, when you get a high school kid, 15, 16, they don't all have cars. Some of them aren't old
Oh,
enough
I
to
know. I was
drive,
thinking
so it's
more. I
hard
was
to-
thinking more of seniors. I've seen a kid that I graduated with in high school actually that went to WPI halfway through his senior year and started taking courses there.
Yeah, those opportunities are probably out there. As far as us formally getting into an arrangement with one of them, we're open to it. But
Just
it's
curiosity question from my part.
No, like I said, we do it with Middlesex and with Bay Path. The logistics of some of the other larger schools that are further away are probably going to be a little bit more difficult.
True.
But we're not averse to
I
it.
used to
Right.
do that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
My other question really was one we've talked about before too is a couple of the candidates we've touched on it too is the accreditation snafu that came up a while back and your thoughts on it essentially.
My thoughts on it.
Keep it civil.
No, I'm very civil. I can give you the abridged version in 50 minutes or the long version in an hour and a half.
Yeah, well, you got about a minute.
Yeah. I'll boil it down to a nutshell from my perspective. NEASC is a private organization. They have different levels within their organization for colleges and for high schools and for different types of schools. We deal with the high school one, obviously. In their main service that they offer to member schools, and you're not required to be a member in Massachusetts, there are towns that aren't involved with NEASC and they can still issue diplomas to their students and their students go to college and not everybody does it. But those that do belong to NEASC, and we've belonged to them since the mid-50s, every 10 years they come out and they do an assessment of your high school. And it's a very thorough process. It starts 2 years in advance. They do a self-study. The teachers have to be involved. The administration has to be involved. At the end of the day, you get a report card essentially from them, and they'll give you suggestions. For instance, back the last time we did it was 2004, and one of the suggestions was put an elevator at the high school to get handicapped people down to the gym level. And they check in periodically over time, and we finally were able to get that through the town a few years ago, and NEAS checked that off the list. So that's it, and sometimes you might get educational suggestions.
In hindsight, there was controversy in the way it was handled. In hindsight, would you have handled it differently?
When you say handled it, I look at that too. I would not, the decisions that we made, I believe were the correct decisions. We sent NEASC a letter back 2 years ago saying, we can't get into your self-study that you want us to do now. We have to do, there was a new program that was mandated by the state as far as dealing with the teachers and getting a whole evaluation process put into place. In the high school principal, we didn't have time to do both of them. So we said we didn't want to do it. The process was outdated. About 15, 16 other towns joined us. They eventually changed, and we got back in. So I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of it needed to be changed. Everybody agreed that it needed to be changed, and it is changed. We could have done a better job in publicizing the discussions that we had back in 2012.
There's been, so you're aware, there's been criticism in the community. That
Right.
Do you think that there's any possibility that open meeting law was violated?
Oh, no,
the
no,
way it
no.
was handled?
We discussed this at a public meeting. What we didn't do, perhaps, is publicize it enough.
From what I understand, it wasn't in the minutes and it wasn't on the agenda. That's my understanding of it.
It wasn't the minutes. I've seen the minutes. There was
The minutes I saw was listed as out-of-state travel.
But I mean, the discussion was in the minutes. The gist of the discussion, because I remember in the minutes, when we were talking about it, I said I want to make sure there's not going to be any issues in terms of college applications and college eligibility, and that was in the minutes. And we asked the superintendent to check into that, and the guidance department did that for us. So there is. I can get them for you. I don't have.
No.
But it wasn't.
I'm done asking the questions at this point on this one.
What I think we should have done a better job of, and maybe it was just, we talk about a lot of things and they're all in public and they're all out, and we didn't make as big a deal of this as we probably should.
I have one last question, and then we're going to let you give your 30-second elevator pitch.
Okay.
Is there any business that would come before the school committee? Do you have anyone that you're related to that works in the public school that would represent a conflict of interest as far as negotiating a contract, for example, that you would have to recuse yourself?
Yes, I have a sister who's a teacher at Memorial School, and she used to work in Wilmington. She got a job in Burlington probably 10 years or so ago. I was always on the school committee subcommittee when we did teacher contracts, and I had to stop doing that.
Okay.
So I can vote on the budget, but I can't get involved on the salary end of it.
And to be fair, you're not the only member of the school committee that has that situation. So
No, it's a small town.
yeah. Well, we're gonna pretty much conclude at this point, and the last.
Well, he's got his 30-second.
Yeah, no, that's what I was getting to. We're gonna pretty much conclude, and we're gonna let Tom wrap up the segment with his 30-second elevator pitch to the voters.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I want to thank the gentleman here for having me. It's a great opportunity. I was telling this to Adam the other day. I wish there were more of these types of forums, because it gives you a chance to talk and gives people a chance to listen. I've been living in town my whole life, 58 odd years. This town means a lot to me. I grew up here. I raised my family here. I've always been, public service, civic commitment has always been important to me. I spent a lot of years coaching youth sports. I spent 7 years on town meeting. I've spent 20 odd years on the school committee. This town means a lot to me. I enjoy doing what I'm doing. The school department's in a good place. I'm proud of the things that we've accomplished. I have a passion for doing what I do. I've never wanted to do anything other than the school committee. Some people use it as a stepping stone. This is what I want to do. I think we do it well. I ask the people to consider giving me a vote on April 9th so I can continue my good work, and I thank you all for having me.
Tom, thanks for
Pleasure.
joining us.
You are.
I just want to
one of the
conclude
few
by
people
saying
I've met
the election
that has
is
lived
on
in
Saturday,
Burlington longer than I have.
April 9th.
54 years.
I think
You're-
we've got 4
you were
great
born
candidates
here.
here. I encourage you to get out and vote. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for all the candidates that participated. Have a great night.